Okay, hi everyone. Today is Tuesday, June 15th, 2021, live streaming from Chicago. I'm Ben Greiner, Director of Apple Technology at Intiva, and today our guest is Tom Bridge. Tom is founding producer of the Mac Admins podcast, which is an excellent podcast, by the way. How long have you done that?
We're at 5 years now.
5 years,
I can't
wow.
even believe it, but it's been going on for 5 years, and there's plenty of archives. We just released episode 220 just yesterday.
Oh, awesome! Congratulations.
Thank you.
Tom is also the principal product manager focused on the Apple platform at JumpCloud. And we've known each other for years, and most recently spent some time together at Apple X World in Sydney, Australia, which was awesome. I say
that was
recently,
incredible.
Yeah, that was 2019, but that was really the last conference I went to.
I think that was the last big Apple one that I went to. I went to a couple of smaller retreats after that, but that was my last big conference. And I miss getting out on the road. I feel like we're taking one of our first tourist road trips this weekend, and I'm really looking forward to it. So that'll be great.
Awesome. Well, today we're going to talk about directory services, which is a big part of JumpCloud, and your relatively new role at JumpCloud, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to find out, what is it, who needs it, what are the benefits, and we're also going to discuss the announcements that came out of WWDC, Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference last week. We'll save that till the end.
For sure.
And before we jump into directory services, I wanted to sort of set the stage of where I see directory services, and I, like you, have been an Apple, focused on Apple for many, many years. And first of all, I think it's great that JumpCloud brought you in to, sort of speak for the Apple side of the house. If I look at directory services on the scale of, you absolutely positively need it, that's where I see Windows devices living. And on the exact opposite end, you absolutely positively could ignore it. That's where I see traditionally Apple devices living, right?
Sure.
So whenever I go into an organization that's mixed, it's typically more Windows leaning. So they're always trying to get the Apple devices into Apple Directory, Apple Active Directory. They're trying to get the Apple devices into Active Directory for all the wrong reasons, I feel like. And then I'm trying to introduce what I consider to be a modern directory, which is cloud hosted. And it seems like there's still a lot of trepidation from the Windows world around that. So my experience is cloud directory is the future, but I want to hear it from you.
For sure. And here at JumpCloud, we've been directory advocates for almost a decade now. And so if you look at some of the early products that became JumpCloud, they were all focused on, I have this set of data in my Active Directory environment. How do I expose that to other useful things? And of course, this is before the advent of ADFS and before the advent of SAML and other things like that. And so we start to see a more modern cloud-based directory come out of JumpCloud based around those things. I want the ability to have one identity everywhere. And I want to have that identity come with, a bunch of useful features associated with it. So whether that's, a whole bunch of detail about me, the user, or, ending up in third-party applications like Google Workspace or Office 365, or, connecting to tools like Slack, which use modern federated authentication standards like SAML and SCIM to do provisioning of users in real time out beyond just my central directory, and have that, give that time back to the admin, so that you don't have to spend your entire life doing, account management tasks and creating yet another username and password for the end user to manage. How about if that was just one identity for everything you do? And that's JumpCloud.
And I think that's that I would imagine that's where Active Directory grew out of. The idea that we have this directory, everyone's going to tie into it. That's our truth. We're going to connect everything to it. We're going to block things. We're going to allow things. And I think where it breaks down from an Apple perspective, and this is where I want to get your opinion, is the Windows admins typically assume that because they have all this control within Active Directory on a Windows device, that they will also have all of that control on an Apple device, then
Yep.
it's simply not the case,
No.
is it? Yeah.
GPO is, that group policy orchestration isn't something that Apple has ever spoken. There was a time where you could do, like in the back, that old 10.6.8 days, you could do some things with, like an Active Directory, Open Directory, Magic Triangle, I think is what
Right.
we called it.
Right.
Or the
Right.
cylinder of destiny, I think is Joel Rennick's term.
Yeah.
But the idea that you could translate some settings from GPO into MCX settings from macOS, and that's how organizations started to think about it. But obviously, that's not how Apple went. And Apple basically said, yep, cool, we'll let you identify the device. We'll give you a fingerprint of some information about the device, but that's about as far as it goes in modern situation. And, obviously Kerberos authentication is part of that environment. And so you can do domain joins in order to just get Kerberos. But the thing about domains has always been that they're meant for computers that sit still. Do we have computers that sit still anymore? Well, I mean, aside from the pandemic where they've all sat at home, but those machines have been far away from the Active Directory, primary machines, and the domain controllers that, really assert themselves over all of that environment. And so at that point, we have these laptops that go everywhere. And of course, these iOS devices that don't understand any of this on the Apple side of things that, mean we need a new way to start thinking about this.
Yeah, and even Microsoft seems to clearly understand that with Azure AD. That's a different beast, even though it has similar name to AD, Active Directory, but it's in the cloud. And maybe so from a directory standpoint, and this is where I think a lot of businesses, smaller businesses, typically Apple focused, they stumble, is because they do tend to have a lot of different directories. They may have one at Microsoft. They may have one in their HR software. They may have, they traditionally, they would have one even on their Apple server if they had an in-house Apple server. So can you walk us through how a hosted directory, the intention is really to have that central directory? Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, it's intended to be that center object. Now, granted, it can take a primary source of trust from like HR systems, which are natural single point of truths for organizations where the employee, has a full life cycle within the human resources environment, from candidate status through onboarding, through a long and elegant career, building things, and then retirement and departure, or termination, unfortunately, and those kind of situations. And so essentially allowing a directory to take its cues from an HRIS like Bamboo or Workday is something that most modern cloud directory services support as well, so that you can do your user provisioning directly from services like JumpCloud, which act as almost like the cloud broker for your identity, to other applications and to other environments like Google Workspace or Office 365 through directory sync. And so the idea would be at that point that you've got a way to kind of manage life cycle of your user from onboarding through offboarding.
And we got involved in directory services early on because of the appeal of the SAML or SSO integration with different cloud providers, where I think we were frustrated both from our own use and introducing it to clients, is at least several years ago, not everyone had that integration, or it was like there was a paywall and we weren't large enough to afford the paywall. Has any of that changed? Is it getting better? Will it continue to get better?
I hope it will continue to get better. And I hope that kind of user provisioning model will be core to everyone's product and not an additional add-on. At JumpCloud, I mean, as part of our platform, that's something that we include as part of our platform because we think it's really important for our customers. And our customers tell us that it's important to them. So we're doing our job by listening at that point and making sure that it's part of our core offering.
And could you explain to those listening just exactly what that means? When I say, like, we use JumpCloud. So when we go to JumpCloud and we integrate, actually Bamboo HR is a good example. We also use Bamboo HR. So if that's integrated with SSO, what does that really mean in your world?
Sure. And so that means at that point that your login for it's a single sign-on, right? That's what SSO stands for. And that so essentially at that point it's a federated authentication. And so that at that point users can exist in one place as as the authentication source, and then Jump Cloud serves as the authentication point for those identities. And so that at that point, when a user goes to log in, and if you ever seen that button that says sign in with Google or sign in with Twitter or sign in with Facebook,
Or now
those
Apple.
are
Sign in
or
with
now
Apple's
Apple,
new.
right? Yes,
Yeah.
sign in with Apple. That's a big part of the federated authentication scheme. So that we want a way to allow the user to pick their authentication source at that point, but we really want them to pick Jump Cloud as that source. And so essentially, when I go to Slack and want to log in, it will route me back through Jump Cloud. And so that I can also make sure that depending on where I'm logging in from, whether that's a work device or my personal phone, that I get the authentication experience that my admin wants me to get, which is, when I'm off the corporate network, an MFA is always required. Or when I'm on a trusted device on a trusted network, maybe the authentication requirements are a little bit more relaxed, and we can just go with a user and a password in those moments.
Yeah.
But the ability for one identity to exist everywhere across an organization is an incredibly powerful tool.
Yeah, and I've from an onboarding and offboarding standpoint, if you have to let someone go, friendly or unfriendly, having the ability to go into, in this case, Jump Cloud, and kill that account. So essentially, every account it's linked to is now inaccessible for that individual. Correct.
Correct. And to have that ability to suspend a user, and so essentially say, all right, it's 4:00 on your last day. You know what? It's been a pleasure working with you. Thanks. It's been fun. We're going to hit the suspend button on all of your accounts. Everybody's logged out from that account at that time, and future login attempts will fail, even if you have a valid password and a valid MFA, because the admin, the directory knows at that point that you are no longer to log in. And so essentially, whether you're using our directory connectors to Office 365 or Google Workspace, or our SSO connections to those same services, the user will be locked out of their account at that time. The account will not be destroyed. The account will stay behind, because sometimes you need people's accounts to stay behind, either for legal hold purposes, document retention purposes, any number of good reasons for that information not to just vanish from the face of the earth, but the user just goes into suspended status at that time until such time as you've finally gone through all of their data, all of their items, and at that point you can remove the user permanently.
And the flip side, the onboarding, could you walk through how that works in a Jump Cloud
For
world?
sure. So, when we have an onboarding cycle, we know some things about those people when they come to work for us, whether that's, hey, I'm going to have an engineer, and that engineer is going to need Slack and GitHub, and they're going to need VS Code, and they're going to need Office 365. You can scope applications to user groups, so that at that point, any user in that group gets access to GitHub Enterprise, or any user in that group gets access to Slack, Google Workspace, all sorts of things. So that essentially, when you assign a user a group, they get all of the applications that are associated with that. So in the event that the connector supports what's called just-in-time provisioning.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Just in time.
That's right.
That's so, another level of this.
That's another level of it. And so, if the service provider supports the concept of just-in-time provisioning, and here I think a great example is like Zoom. And so you want somebody to have a professional Zoom account when they join the company. Based on their group membership, they can be assigned to Zoom. And the first time they go to log in, it will create their account for them, because they know that you're coming from an account with your domain. And so you've claimed that domain at the service provider, and all authentications will flow directly from the single sign-on provider, in this case, Jump Cloud. And when they go to complete that sign-in on the first time, they'll say, a new user, and then draw data directly from your directory including their first name, their last name, their title, their department, more information like their workspace, so that essentially if they're getting a phone number for, if they're using Zoom for phones, they can get a local phone number based on their work location. Those are all the kind of things that single sign-on applications can do by providing metadata along with a username, which is what SAML provides.
Yeah.
That all of that data is then present for the other side to use and focus with.
And I remember the early days of SSO. It was a little nerve-wracking because once you bound that your domain to that application, if it wasn't done correctly, you could get locked out. I think it's gotten a lot easier.
It has, and service providers have also gotten smart about this. And so I think two examples that I love are Google and Slack. Google basically says you can't SAML authenticate your super admins, and super admins will always use a user, a password, and a multi-factor. And Slack is the same way. Your workspace owners will only ever authenticate using usernames and passwords. And it's another good reason for those usernames and passwords to be long and difficult.
Yeah.
And then stored in password managers where people can access them if they need to in an audited way.
Yeah, that's smart.
At that point, they don't have to access them on the regular.
And I think there are also some providers that allow you to turn on SSO, and once you're confident with it, then you can disable username and passwords. You don't have to do it, right away.
That's right. Dropbox is a great example of that. They have their 3 flags are off, optional, and on. And so essentially you can provide an SSO experience so that users can log in from a user portal and just do a click a button and be logged in, or they can still log in with their username and their password.
Now, the other thing, the just-in-time provisioning, I think this goes back maybe before, once again, the rough edges were smoothed out. But I remember there were some situations where a client did not want, say, everyone to have a Zoom account. Not everyone needs a Zoom account. And Zoom is not the example here, but I seem to recall it was all or nothing at one point. That's no longer the case, right? You can.
Yeah, that's no longer the case. And so there are some things that you can do. You can say, cool, I want SSO on for this account, but I don't want to use the just-in-time provisioning feature. And it also comes down to all of the different relationships that you have with different vendors. Because you might have I know with Zoom, you buy a fixed number of licenses. And so when you run out of licenses, you can't create more accounts until you have some more licenses. But whereas Slack will just keep adding users until the cows come home, because they see that as the clear revenue stream at that point, that being sticky requires them to be frictionless at that point.
And JumpCloud has a feature which I hope maybe I was a part of getting through. I pushed for years for it, and then they finally introduced it, and that's bookmarks. So I don't know if you're familiar with bookmarks, but it sounds like you are. So
yes, indeed.
I was frustrated that because not every application supports SSO, but I wanted, especially a new hire, to be able to go to that single, pane of glass, so to speak, and say, well, here are all the apps we use.
That's right. And so, if you have an application that's not single sign-on, but you still want to bookmark the login page for people to go to, they can get that link directly in their JumpCloud portal and click through, and then either to use the forget password tool to get a new credential, or have that login page always available to them at their JumpCloud portal, so that there's one, like you said, single pane of glass for all of the applications a company uses today.
And it's, and we use a lot today, right? It's growing. So I use it as a nice, clean bookmark interface to just know, even if there's no SSO integration, it's like, oh yeah, that's the website. I've even used it for websites in some cases that don't require login, just because I can never remember them and I keep losing them. So I just put them into JumpCloud and I can go in and get them.
For sure.
So maybe you can talk about, I know you're not the sales guy at JumpCloud, but maybe you can help distinguish, how does JumpCloud really differentiate itself from the likes of, Okta, OneLogin, even Azure AD? those are competitors in a way,
They
right?
are. Well,
Yeah.
and they're competitors, and they're also customers that we use both. And so,
Mhm.
you might have a workflow that, our Radius, Cloud Radius product is very well thought of. And so we may run into customers where they use Okta, but Okta really does not have a good Cloud Radius implementation.
Mm.
And so if your network really requires good 802.1x Radius authentication, you can do that directly in Jump Cloud today. The other thing that Jump Cloud does that Okta and OneLogin and Azure AD definitely do not do today is that they are not mobile device managers. They're
Mm.
also not workstation-based tools. So that at that point, Jump Cloud can also have a presence on your device. And today we support devices for Mac OS and Windows, Linux, across a number of distributions, both within the Windows world and in Linux. You get the ability to have some presence and get some device insight information
Mhm.
directly from a root agent running on a Mac, a Windows device, or a Linux device. And that will be stateful information around what applications are installed, what's the network status of this device at
Mhm.
the time being. Pulled me a whole bunch of useful information off of this device and present it to me.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing that a Jump Cloud can do that Okta can't touch, which is
And
essentially have a presence on the device.
yeah, and I will say for those clients listening in, if you already work with Intiva, we have you covered on the MDM side
That's right.
with a much more robust MDM. This is more, I think it's fair to say, a light touch MDM. Would you
Correct.
say? Yeah.
I would say,
Um,
we're really only an MDM because Apple made us be an MDM for certain
yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And so, if you have need of a full featured MDM, Ntiva has definitely got you covered today. And the Jump Cloud option is there because we had to do it for some things, and we
Yeah.
felt that we couldn't let go of that feature.
Yeah. And if you don't have an MDM, then it's certainly better than nothing. And in fact,
Definitely better than nothing. Way
yeah,
better than nothing.
it's a good place to start. And in fact, speaking of getting started, Jump Cloud still offers, I think, the first 10 accounts free, right?
10 accounts and 10 devices free forever.
Yeah.
So it's not just a time-gated trial. It's just go and check us out. You can hook us up to as many applications as you want to hook us up to. If you're a small business of 5 or 10 people and you don't have growth plan right away, jump in today and really dive in, take a look around, connect a few applications, connect a device or two and see what you can see. Because at that point, Jump Cloud offers you the ability to grow your business by taking some of that IT load off of the owner. Because really, generally speaking, in my experience, if you've got a business of 10 or less, the owner is probably still doling out computers. And they're probably still setting them up for you, and they're probably still doing some of those tasks. Let's take that off your plate.
Right.
And help you put together accounts. So that Google, you've got one login that's your Jump Cloud login, and it connects to Google, and it connects to Office 365, and then it connects to whatever SAML applications you're using today, Slack, Zoom, all of those great workspace enabling tools that allow small teams to really operate effectively. And today you can do that free with Jump Cloud and connect those things together for free.
Yeah, and I want to share a quick story because we we used to use OneLogin, and this is going back, I think, before Jump Cloud, at least before I was aware of Jump Cloud. We used OneLogin, and we also tried to use Azure AD. Now, this is before we joined Intiva. We did not have the deep bench of Office 365 experts that Intiva has, and frankly, Azure AD was overwhelming. It's like, I cannot figure this out. It sort of works, sort of doesn't work. I don't know why. Forget it. We went to OneLogin, but then we were struggling with OneLogin because I think they had grown to the point where we couldn't get. It didn't feel like they were serving our needs, and then we discovered Jump Cloud. And a quick story: we ran into a client. They were a prospect at the time who had a very strong mix of Mac and PCs, and their PCs were heavily tied into Active Directory, not just an Active Directory on-prem, but it was like Active Directory on-prem tied to the cloud, tied to multiple clouds. It was complex. And I wanted them to feel comfortable, and I wanted their IT, the Windows techs to feel comfortable moving to a platform. And I was surprised, some of the people we talked to at the time, the other, not Jump Cloud, the other companies, they really were focused on, oh yes, we can tie into your Active Directory. We can tie into your Active Directory. And I said, well, I want to replace Active Directory. And they weren't really, at least the salespeople at the time were not really thinking that way. JumpCloud was the only one that said, with confidence, yes, we can replace Active Directory.
And we absolutely can.
Yeah, and I'm not saying those other companies can't, they just weren't thinking that way. And they weren't approaching it that way. And that's what I liked about JumpCloud. So JumpCloud did help us very easily replace this complex Active Directory with JumpCloud, and it works, on Mac and Windows, and it's got a great interface. So, and it's even better now that you're part of the team. So, even more Apple friendly. But not to say they were Apple friendly to begin with. So yeah, I love the JumpCloud. I think if anyone has questions, if you haven't yet adopted a cloud directory service, talk to us, talk to JumpCloud. If you already use Intiva, definitely talk to us. Or if you're frustrated by whatever product you're currently using, let's see if we can fix that, or if it makes sense to evaluate JumpCloud. I would say today, from what I'm seeing, we've kind of narrowed it down to, Azure AD and JumpCloud. And I think JumpCloud is a nicer interface and gives us more flexibility, but we know Azure AD is deeply entrenched in some of these organizations, so it's not going away.
For sure. And that has been one of the focuses for us, is to build a better experience for people managing the problem. There's no question that Azure AD does everything. The only problem is that, yes, in the interface they have to account for everything. And sometimes that just means yet another item, yet another button, yet another menu, yet another tool.
Yeah.
We're trying to build a more holistic framework for all of those things. And I think we deliver on that process pretty well.
Well, it's we're almost at the end of our time, but I did want to get to WWDC, and
yes,
and we can go over a little bit if you guys want to stick around. And if I haven't answered, or if I've missed any questions, ping me again. Let me check my questions chat and make sure I haven't missed any. So WWDC, there's so much information that Apple threw at us, dumped on us, video after video. I haven't even gotten through it all. And I'm sure with your podcast, you're maybe a little more motivated to get up to speed. So I wanted to hear from you, if you had to narrow it down to one, maybe two, maybe three of your top.
Well, I was going to say, I got three, and I'm going to talk about them in order. And
I'm going to write them down.
First one's super easy. Erase all contents and settings. So the ability of a macOS device to act like an iOS device, and essentially at the completion of a user's term, right now, restoring that device to feel ready again it's a process that's longer than it should be.
Yeah, with special key commands and
of course, and network access and all sorts of things. It's painful. But if I just want to return the machine, take out the user, take out any apps that they left behind, and just return it to the setup assistant, now that's a 5-minute process with erase all contents and settings in macOS Monterey. Really excited for that. And
I didn't even know about that. I did not know.
I am so excited for this one. This was one of the things where I was like, eating the popcorn and like clapping and hooting and hollering as I watched the keynote. I was like, yes, this good. The other thing that we get is for the very first time, we're going to get what's called declarative management. For iOS. iOS user enrollments are going to be able to benefit from declarative management, where all of the management actions on the device will be taken on device. And you'll be able to describe, or one could even say declare, a managed condition for the device. So that the device must be running this version of iOS. It must have these profiles installed, and here's where you get them from. And then, and only then, can you deliver these 5 applications. So declarative management seems to be a more stateful management technique that we're going to get first for one very narrow user enrollment, which is BYOD, for mobile device management. So I'm excited about that, and I'm excited to see that spread. And
so just to confirm, I think I understand this. It means that if I bring my own device into an organization and I put this profile on, it's going to say, you can have access to company data only if you meet this criteria. And by the way, I noticed you're missing one of those things, so you have to fix it before this is going to work.
That's correct. And so essentially, that's the challenge with mobile device management commands and profiles, is that if the device misses one, it might not be as secure as you'd want it to be in order to enable a specific application. And so at that point, until the device meets that criteria, it will not act on the other application information. So there's some exciting things coming down here. It's not going to be a very widespread part of iOS 15 or even a widespread part of the Mac platform at all at this time. So
I thought there was another name for that. Maybe it was a Microsoft term for requiring certain aspects. Maybe it was in Intune.
Conditional management
conditional
is certainly part of
access. Yes, that's what I was thinking.
Conditional access is part of the Intune frameworks for all of this. And this is a way to do this on device instead of via MDM command. So I'm really excited to get a look at what that's going to mean in the long run. This will also require managed Apple IDs and a bunch of other things. This is going to be a very narrow part of iOS 15, but it shows good thinking and will allow them to bring that management technique to macOS systems in the future. And I'm really excited about that. So I would say those are my two big tent poles. I would say the other one that's really interesting are changes to user enrollment that's more IDP focused. So as an IDP, I'm really excited about a new IDP focus for user enrollment, so that periodically users will have to re-authenticate with the mobile device manager in order to keep their settings and applications. So that at that point, you can make sure that the people who had that BYOD profile on their device still work for you, which is really important for seasonal workers or organizations where turnover is high.
And just to clarify, IDP, identity provider, that's correct the term. Yes. Okay. And so today, if I log in with an identity provider that's tied to my device, it's pretty much when I restart and log in, right? So you're saying now,
it's not even then. So like with an iOS device, like your passcode is never disclosed. So this is really the only time that you would ever do this would be during enrollment cycle. And if you forgot to deactivate somebody, they would stay on there forever. But if you just suspended their user, it might not remove the management profile from the device that was coming down. And so at that point, you can essentially make it check every 90 days, make sure they still have a viable, sign into your identity system before they grant further access to the device's private business resources.
Okay, I see. Well, that sounds awesome. And I was intrigued by the driver's license on your iPhone.
For sure.
I mean, I have wanted for years to not have to carry my wallet around, and we're getting closer and closer to that point. I think immediately after Apple announced that, there were privacy people filing lawsuits or something to stop it. But I just wondered, do they understand that this is encrypted on device?
I think my concern is, do I have to unlock the device before I hand it over? Or is this a place where the device is locked, but I'm just locked into this ID screen? And that's my hope, is that from all of this, that, I could, because that's the last thing I want to do even as a law-abiding, standard American citizen, right? I don't want to hand over my unlocked iOS device to the authorities if I don't have to. And especially if I'm just trying to prove who I am, right? My wallet is small. You can see it's very thin these days, because they're really all I need to carry in there is my driver's license and, a credit card. I would love to just be able to carry this instead. And so, at that point, be able to have a digital representation of my identity that can then be presented in that state, but that I don't have to unlock my phone entirely to pass that along. So I'll be very interested to see where that develops and goes. If I don't have to fully unlock my phone just to unlock a driver's license, I'm really excited about that feature.
Yeah, it's early days for that, and we'll learn more.
Agreed.
But the other thing that I have been wanting for a while is legacy contacts. This idea that if something happens to me, I could kind of allow my wife to take over ownership of my accounts. I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the future.
Yeah, and as someone who's had to help in those circumstances, it's always tough. And it would be easier for the families involved here if there was like a way to do this. And so I'm very excited about legacy contacts coming out. Recovery contacts can also be done as part of this as well.
Yeah.
So that you can set a recovery contact so that if my phone, sank to the bottom of the Potomac on a river cruise, and I no longer had a way to authenticate that I had my recovery phone number, for example, I would want to be able to pass that information off to my partner and have them handle that kind of thing. So that's an exciting development there. I think one of the other really cool features that I thought was awesome was universal control, which is for those of us who have, an iPad sitting right here next to our laptop, to be able to open that up and be able to essentially use one keyboard and mouse to control not just the Mac in front of me, but the iPad next to me, and just, treat it as one seamless desktop without having to, set up Sidecar, for example. I thought that demonstration was magic. And I am ready to see it in action. I don't think it's in the first betas, but I'm looking forward to seeing it later in the cycle. And the ability to drag and drop files that way, the ability to move your cursor and keyboard and control things that way is just exciting. And
it is like magic. Someone said is it witchcraft or it is witchcraft? I don't know, but yeah, to see that demo, it's like, I mean, I'm pretty sure it uses your iCloud account, right? Like you have to have an iCloud account.
Yeah, it's a handoff feature.
But it does look like magic. It looks really amazing, and I'm sure it'll be fantastic until it doesn't work, and then it'll be super frustrating to figure out why, which is sort of why today when handoff doesn't work, and normally it does, but when it doesn't work, I get a little frustrated.
I will say it has gotten a lot better. Handoff used to be a lot flakier than it is now. So I'm excited to see that, if there's extra improvements that come along with that, I'm excited to see what they are. And the ability to do control surface information as well as file transfer, as well as, and it also works with Macs as well. So that you can have your Mac and an iMac next to you and an iPad next to you. You can be connected on both sides of your screen.
I wonder what the limit is. Could I have a wall of old iPhones? Oh, okay, no, I can't. So
it's 3 right now. And so maybe at some point that would be kind of neat. And to be able to like have a set of test suite of iOS devices above, that'd be kind of cool.
There's so many things, and I know a lot of this doesn't apply to business, but they're just, I think, interesting things that pushes forward. And it's always, Apple is always trying to innovate, and they always get both propped up and slapped down for it. But that's what happens when you try to innovate. Some people get it, some people don't. Some things work, some things don't. But super exciting times. I mean, I feel like in all the years, this seems like so much. There's so many things with iOS 15 and macOS Monterey that are coming out. I don't know if this, maybe it's just because we've been sitting in a pandemic for the past year, and now we're like, oh my God, this is so cool. Because they always put out a lot of information at WWDC.
For sure.
I'm super excited. And now it's just a matter of getting, when will we see this stuff? It won't be until the fall, right?
It's the fall. So, I mean, Apple generally releases iOS first and macOS to follow. Late September, early October is generally the time frame we start to look at for this. Obviously, Apple doesn't comment on their launch day until it happens.
They don't.
Yeah. So, we hope to see that in those time frames. And, obviously, we're working hard on testing every part of our products to make sure that they're ready. And so I have a detailed test plan for Monterey that I'm working through now for JumpCloud's products and at the login window and elsewhere within the environment, so that you can extend your JumpCloud ID straight down to a macOS Monterey device on launch day. That's what we're excited about.
Yeah.
So we're working hard on that. And, I'm really excited to see these features in the field. I think this is going to be a great release year, and there's a lot to like.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I see an application, and I just saw one the other day, and it was VPN related, I installed it, and it said, "Warning: this app may break in future versions of macOS 10." That's just a clear sign that developer does not really prioritize macOS and what they're doing, and so be wary of any app that does that or fails to embrace it, because Apple does put out betas now. It's not like the old days of Steve Jobs where we didn't know what was coming down the pipe until it just showed up on our doorstep. They put out betas, they allow the developers to get early access, And if someone wants to embrace the Apple platform, the tools are there, right? I mean,
For sure. And everybody, out there, Ben's part of this great program called Apple Seed. So am I, where corporations get access to this kind of stuff for special feedback channels around enterprise issues. So, anybody worth their salt is doing that work today, providing feedback during the beta cycle and ready for releases as it happens.
Yeah, and that's also given us more confidence to be more aggressive in our upgrading of the operating system. Historically, when Apple would dump that on the door with absolutely no warning or access, it was a scary time, especially when they made it free, because it was so disruptive. We had people, downloading OS upgrades and breaking workflows and then calling us and saying, can you fix it? And they're like, no, we have to wait for Adobe, or we have to wait for Apple or somebody to fix it. But now it's getting much easier, and the developers, like Adobe, who are more serious about this, get things working. And that's why I like working with partners like JumpCloud who understand the Apple platform. Apple is different and needs to be treated slightly differently than Windows. Don't try to shoehorn an Apple device into a Windows workflow.
Well, and that's exactly it.
Yeah. And with that, I know we went over, but I think it was worth it to get your thoughts. Thank you, Tom. When's your next, well, not when's your next podcast, but anyone can go to Apple Podcast and
that's right. We're available wherever you find your podcasts today. You can search for the Mac Admins Podcast. It's 3 words. You can find us at podcast.macadmins.org as well. And of course, for JumpCloud, come check us out. You can go to jumpcloud.com. We have a big button on the homepage that says try it free. And we really, really mean it. It's free. Up to 10 users and 10 devices.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Tom. I really appreciate your time. And I'm sure we'll talk soon. Hopefully one day.
Absolutely.
Face to face.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much, Ben.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.